Hello, welcome to another episode of the Project Purple podcast. I'm Dino Varelli, founder and CEO of Project Purple. We have an exciting interview coming up with a very special guest after a few quick updates. Since 2010, we've contributed over $3 million and counting to pancreatic cancer research efforts. We have also allocated $1 million worth of aid to more than 1,300 patients and families throughout our patient aid programs. Your monthly or one-time gift can improve patients' lives through research and assistance programs. You can donate now at projectpurple.org. Pancreatic cancer does not rest, and neither will we. Your support is truly appreciated. If you're looking to get involved in one of our events, whether that means joining a run team, participating in a virtual run walk, group fitness, golf, or anything else you can think of, visit projectpurple.org/events to learn more. Without further ado, let's meet our special guest today. Coming to us, usually I say like all the way, like Manchester, Connecticut's not that far from where we're based here in Seymour, Connecticut. So I'm not going to say all the way, but pancreatic cancer survivor Bradley Paul from Connecticut, Manchester, Connecticut, was just right outside of Hartford. So probably about 45 minutes here from the office. So welcome to the Project Purple podcast, Bradley.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me, Dino. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm right down the road, relatively speaking.
Yeah. And you'll get this. I know. I give a quick shout out to our Connecticut Huskies. You're a lot closer to UConn than we are here, and the last couple of weeks it's been buzzing up there because what do we do here in Connecticut? We win championships. So for my friends around the country that I know go to various other schools or have gone to other schools, we do a lot in the Midwest. And Bradley, I'll just share with you. I know we were talking before, just catching up before we hit record, and I know you spent some time there on the West Coast or western part of the U.S. and I've traveled quite a bit, and I always laugh. This kind of joke. I mean, people are probably going to think I'm like this arrogant guy, but like go to lots of like certain Midwestern states and, they've won like national football championships in the past. I won't name the state, but, every time we win a basketball championship here at UConn, and we had that run with the women and the guys, I think it was like 6 years in a row, like everyone had won on. I was like, well, guys, it's like kind of commonplace, where those Midwest colleges, I think they're still waiting like 20 years now to get back to like, that prominent. I'm like, hey, it's kind of like usual circumstance for us here in Connecticut. So it's a great state.
No big deal.
Yeah, no big deal. We won another one, right? Well, welcome to the podcast. I heard about your story through, since we're talking about athletics, right? Through Game Time, which is a local online, I say local, it covers the whole state of Connecticut, but a Connecticut sports online paper. They do stuff for the New Haven Register, but they've really kind of built a presence. And there was a great story about your story there. And as soon as I saw it, I think I got a Google alert because I have Google alert set up for pancreatic cancer. And it came across and I told the team, I'm like, hey, we got to get this guy on, get him on the podcast or, see how we can help. And so just really excited to have you on here because from my point of view, and I tend not to do a lot of research on people because I love to have this interaction and hear it for the first time. So I'm excited to have you on here because I know, a little bit about your story. You're a local nutmegger. And doing some great things for the pancreatic cancer community as a whole of sharing your journey, which is just really special, especially in your role, which I'm sure we're going to get into here with the youth and what you're doing there with the high school kids. So with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to you, Bradley. And as we said before we hit record, you can say as high level as you want, or you can get into the weeds to kind of share your journey, a little bit about your background. Hopefully your friends and family know a lot about this, but we've got a broad audience and a lot of listeners. So this is probably the first time of them hearing your story. So with that, the microphone is yours.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. And once again, I just have such gratitude for you guys reaching out and connecting with me and inviting me on. Yeah, I can go back as far as I want. So it's April 1st, 1994. Yeah, so I think that I kind of talk about my life like before diagnosis and after diagnosis, like BD and AD. So was diagnosed with pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors in the summer of 2019. Um, and so my life, BD, my life before my diagnosis, as we mentioned, I grew up in central Connecticut, born and raised in Manchester. I went to East Catholic as a high school. And then my college program, my undergraduate was at Clark University, and I have a master's in public administration from Clark as well. Because we were introduced through athletics, through lacrosse. I started playing lacrosse in one of my local towns, maybe in like fourth or fifth grade, something like that. I was introduced. My father, he played a little bit growing up in like upstate New York. And so he really introduced me to the game when a couple of my friends, they started picking it up. Once again, I played in high school through college. When I graduated, I knew that I wanted to live and move to New Mexico. I have family out there, and it's a beautiful state. Love the natural beauty. Just everything appealed to me. Love the culture, love the atmosphere, and I found I knew that I wanted to get into counseling. My undergraduate was in psychology. I've always been called to working in working in service of others, and so much of my like my personal journey, aside from my diagnosis, has been through mental health. So I have had a real intimate relationship with depression and suicide for most of my life, and so like through my own journey, I've also as cancer goes through my family, so does mental health and addiction. So my oldest brother dealt with his relationship with specifically opioids for his entire life. And really that like shaped a lot of my development growing up. And so this path that I went on with my mental health journey and kind of healing and integration really inspired me to be in service to others, and to kind of pursue that as a career path. So looking in New Mexico, I found this like perfect master's program. It was an art therapy and counseling, and like that was exactly what I wanted to do. So I moved out there. I started working in the field at an intensive outpatient program. I moved to a residential program. And it was just incredible. It was everything that I wanted. Moving out there with one of my really good friends. I had my dog. Um, you know, Getting up in the morning and working out with my friends, going and doing this amazing job that I've always wanted to do. Coming home and being surrounded by this natural beauty, going on these amazing hikes on the weekends with my dog, summiting these 16,000 foot, peaks in my backyard.
Yeah.
All this and starting my master's program in a few months, kind of so similar to so many other like young people's stories of like, I was just starting my life and then I got hit with this diagnosis. And so, yeah, it was really like I was just a few months out from starting this master's program. I had just started a new position at this residential program, and I started having kind of like intestinal like discomfort around like meals. Like I started, like in the morning, I'd kind of wake up and kind of have this like gnawing like discomfort in my kind of like the pit of my stomach, and eating didn't really help it. It kind of made it worse, and I'd kind of deal with it. And I'm very much the type of person who, I was an athlete my entire life. My mom is very much the person who, unless there's bones sticking out, blood coming out, serious issues, it's, rub some dirt on it and let's go,
Yeah.
right? Like never really like went to the doctor for things. Um,
And how old were you when this started happening, Bradley?
25. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I
So
was, yeah,
25-year-olds typically, and I know like I guess where I'm going with this is I know it's like when you're young, you like feel invincible, right? Like as you get older, you're like, oh man, I don't think I could do that. But 25 years old, man, you can conquer the world, right? And no one's thinking like, all right, I could eat whatever I want. Like you're still in that your metabolism's still fast enough where you could eat, you could drink, you could do whatever you want and still bounce back pretty quickly and be a superhero the next day.
yeah, exactly. And coming few years out of being a college athlete, I'm if we want to do the astrology thing, I'm an Aries, so I'm real big on that like physical activity and that movement. And so yeah, it went from playing lacrosse, in college, but then even then getting up at 5 in the morning and working out 4 or 5 days a week with my roommate, and on the days that I wasn't working out, going on multiple mile runs with my dog. On the weekend, like I mentioned, hiking these mountains. um yeah, riding motorcycles, doing all these
Yeah.
things that, yeah, I'm an invincible 25-year old.
Yeah.
And because of the substance abuse in my family, I've never drank. The biggest vices that I had is marijuana. um and so like I've always been, never smoked cigarettes, all this stuff. And yeah, and I started having this pain, and it got to the point after about like a month of having this, I started missing work. And that was something that, I'm the type of person who, like I'll drag myself in and make my boss tell me to leave. But I just couldn't come into work, and I missed a few days, and I came back in on a Friday, and my office was right next to a therapist group room. And I was sitting in my office, and as she was, as they were going through kind of like our morning meetings, our morning groups, and their group dismissed and her room opened up, and I just went in and laid on the ground, just like full spread eagle, like, oh my God, like what is going on? And she walked in and she was like, hey, are you okay? And I was like, I don't know, should I go to the ER? And she said, if you have to ask, you should probably
Yeah.
go. um so yeah, like on the way to the emergency room, it was like a standalone emergency room separate from the hospital. On the way to the emergency room, I called up my mom, and as I mentioned, we have a big family history of cancer. um and that wasn't even on our minds at the time. I called up my mom, let her know, and she said, oh, um you know talking to her now about it, I guess she was playing a little bit cool, because she knew that if I was calling up to go to the emergency room, she knew that I was something was serious. Something serious was happening. Um, but she kind of playing it cool and kind of making fun of me a little bit. And she mentioned, kind of getting off the phone of, mention, don't forget to mention that your uncle died from pancreatic cancer. And I was like, oh, mom, okay, we have a little bit of a dark humor, morbid sensibilities in our family, so it wasn't that crazy. So I walk into the ER, and it was there was like an urgent care clinic like attached to it. I walk in, and and they kind of looked at me, and they were like, "Oh, you sure you don't want the urgent care?" And I was like, "Oh no, like I'm in the right place. Like I definitely want to be here." Um, and so I spent probably, 4 or 5 hours in the emergency room. They ran all the tests. Every test they came back said, you're the healthiest person we've seen in weeks. There's nothing wrong with you. Um, I had a pretty good rapport with the doctor. We were kind of like joking the whole time. I mentioned to him, as he took my family history, and he's walking out the room, being like, "Oh, my mom said, mention my uncle died from pancreatic cancer. She'd kill me if I didn't mention it." And he was kind of like, "Oh, like don't even worry about it, right? Like not even something that we're worried about, especially after hearing my long list of all the other cancers in my family." Um, and so after all these tests came back and nothing was showing up, he said, "All right, we'll do a CT scan, and if it doesn't show anything, there's nothing that we can do. It's just a mystery." And so came in, did the scan, was waiting in my room, and he came in the room and said, "Oh, remember when I said, we don't have to worry about it being pancreatic cancer? Well, there's a mass in your pancreas and the surrounding lymph nodes." Um, and at that point, I was kind of in that like Walter White Breaking Bad moment of like, "You said what? I have what in me? There's what going on?" Like, "Oh, okay." And he was like, "All right, we're gonna, admit you to the hospital. We'll biopsy you over the weekend. It's looking like right now, not like regular pancreatic cancer, but pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors." And, I'm still in this, you just punched me in the face with this information. I'm still recovering, picking myself up off the mat. And so he was like, "Oh, it's what Steve Jobs had."
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that was like, okay, solid. I can like latch onto that. That's something for me to like Google later on. Yeah, and and I drove myself to this emergency room. So I was like, "All right, I'll drive myself to the hospital." And they were like, "Oh no, we're strapping you to the gurney. We're getting the ambulance. We're getting you in." And I was like, "There's no way. Like, you'll have to restrain me. Like, I did put up a big fuss about trying to drive myself there and like be independent." And I think that was kind of looking back on it, that turning point for me of being like, "Oh, like I gotta learn how to ask for help. I gotta learn how to be okay with others assisting me, and not being this invincible 25-year-old, this really independent, self-reliant person." And just kind of surrendering to being strapped into the gurney, driven to the hospital. I'm trying to like crack jokes with my, the guys in the ambulance with me, and they're not really having it. And, I called up my mom to kind of let her know. And, you know, she reached out to my family that was in the area. So they all, by the time that I was admitted, they were coming and visiting me. My roommates were there. My ex-girlfriend from college was actually kind of coincidentally in the area. And so I got like an email from her being like, I'm on the bus like to the hospital right now. You know, it was really amazing kind of, you know, being so far away from where I grew up, but having, you know, so much of my close support be there during that time. And so, yeah, I wasn't biopsied over the weekend because they didn't, you know, that staff wasn't there or whatever. And by I think maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, I was biopsied. Um, it turned out that not only was this like neuroendocrine tumors are a rare type of pancreatic cancer, or rare cancer just in general, but then I have like a rare grade category of that. So, you know, in that like limbo purgatory time period of waiting for, you know, because none of the oncologists would talk to me. They say, oh, we got to wait for the biopsy. We, you know, it's not cancer. You know, they wouldn't even confirm that had spread to my lymph nodes. I was like, dude, like you've seen, you saw the scan, right? Like, don't tell me that it hasn't spread, right? Like it's metastasized. That's bad. Like, don't lie to me. But they wouldn't even, you know, confirm or deny that until they had, you know, the real clear test results. Um, so yeah, it got sent out. That like purgatory limbo waiting period got extended while they kind of had to like retest it, rebiopsy it to really see kind of what grade and category it was, because um, so many of the treatments are based on that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, and during this time, I stopped really being able to eat like solid foods, um, and lost. I went from being like 175 pounds over the next couple of months. I think that my lowest weight was like 135. Like I had lost like 40 pounds.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
Bradley. Did you
Okay.
ever like it's so fascinating to me in the sense that like you go to the hospital, you have all this testing done, and then like it just hits the wall. So just
Mm-hmm.
curious if like if this episode, like if you never went to the hospital, would all this just happened you know, eventually on its own, or you know, this was like that sometimes you see like this tipping point, right? Like these symptoms just exacerbate, but then it seems like a lot of times once people finally get that diagnosis, then it just like sends it like full send, like right away. And I don't know if there's a timing of just maybe that's why people present when they do, because it reaches that point where there's the body just can't handle it anymore.
Yeah, I have no idea, but you're absolutely right. Like for whatever reason, like the moment I got that confirmed diagnosis, like it went from, oh, I could kind of eat some small meals and not be in that much discomfort, to, and maybe it was the biopsy when they came in and poked my tumors with
Yeah,
the, you know, woke them
yeah,
up.
yeah.
Maybe it was that, but from that point on, like it was not only, it wasn't just discomfort, it was pain. And it was like, I really wasn't able to eat. It was, you know, I stopped being able to like sleep. I was taking, I call them palliative showers, you know, these like
Yeah,
multiple hour long showers of just having like a different physical body sensation go on to like take me away from, you know, just my internal
yeah,
distress.
yeah.
Um, and because a few things, because I'm a very stubborn person, talking about that Aries energy, but also, you know, the substance abuse throughout my family. I really turned away all of like the pain medication initially, until it got to the point where I just like couldn't, you know, I was actually re-hospitalized because I was in so much pain.
Mm.
um yeah, and I just like got to the point where I was like just so physically worn down and beaten down from the discomfort, from, the disease taking the toll, that I was like, whatever, you want to give me whatever, like I'll take whatever kind of relief you want,
Yeah.
or whatever you're going to give me. I As much as I love New Mexico, their healthcare system isn't the greatest. I want to get a second opinion. This is a rare cancer. I'm looking for outside help. We ended up reaching out to a family friend here in Connecticut through Hartford Healthcare, or Hartford Hospital, excuse me. And I think that we reached out to them on like a Wednesday, and by the next day they were like, "Oh, we'll see you on Monday."
Mm.
So I ended up flying, packed my bag for like a week, flew into Connecticut, and saw the doctor on a Monday. And he said, "Oh, you're not going back. Like you're staying here. We're starting treatments immediately." That was it. And so, I had to kind of coordinate moving out of my apartment, ending my job, getting my dog, getting my car, my motorcycle, all my stuff out, and, just kind of like jumping into treatments. And it was really rough, because it was palliative radiation and chemotherapy immediately, just to get like the size, like the tumor bulk down, so that I could start eating again, get back on, put back on weight. Cause they were like, if you don't start eating, we're going to tube feed you. And I'm like, I don't remember a lot of, those like initial months of treatment, just because I was so sick, so worn down. And then by the time that I kind of started being able to repair myself, that was when I reached out to Pat Bushnell, the head coach at East Catholic, who became a coach there my junior year, actually. And I played with him on like our travel teams. He's a big reason why I got into the college that I did, Clark, and played there. And so I reached out to him because I knew that I wanted to come back and coach and give back in that way. It was something that I did when I was healthy in Santa Fe. I coached at their Santa Fe prep school there with Mark Reynolds, who is another Connecticut guy, actually, who lived and worked out there as a teacher. And he was just like a monster. He played at Daniel Hand, I believe. And it was just awesome, coaching with them. And so I kind of wanted to keep that going. And so I introduced, I was introduced as the kind of head JV coach there, and really kind of took that on. And basically since 2019 and getting this diagnosis, like my life has become so much more magnified and intense. And just like the 25 years that came prior don't even compare remotely to the 5 years that have come since. It's like weird to say, but like this disease has given me so much like beauty and perfection in my life. Like I wouldn't change anything about my life at all, as much as I would go back and change everything. But
no,
like,
I mean, I can relate to that, Bradley. I think, and for those that are listening that have maybe gone through similar journeys, maybe not with pancreatic cancer,
yeah,
but other cancers. I think we hear this often, right? And sometimes in traumatic events, which getting cancer is a traumatic event, right? People realize like what's really important, right? And things that come into their lives because of these traumatic events in a positive. I mean, I always say, and we just met, but there's two ways to look at things. You can either look at the positives or you can look at the negatives. And, people have choice, right? That's the God-given thing, right? That we have the ability to do that. I went to Notre Dame of Fairfield, down in Fairfield. So, East Catholic's a very similar school.
Oh yeah.
and so, you get ingrained there, like we're indoctrinated into, the philosophy of, service to others, which is very important, to provide support for others, but then also, I think a little bit of that mindset, right? Of, let's be honest. I mean, they're both Catholic schools, so Jesus Christ sacrificed himself for the betterment of everyone else. So it's pretty obvious. Like, I guess you either buy into it or you don't, right? In some
Yeah.
aspects. So yeah, I completely get what you're saying. Question that so you move back, when do you move back to Connecticut? In 2020 or in 19 then? So like even before you start treatment in New Mexico.
It was, yeah, so I was diagnosed, oh my goodness, my family makes fun of me for this because I can never remember. They're like, it's an important date, you should know this. I want to say the end of July. I
2019.
Yeah, diagnosed the end of July 2019, and then I believe that I spent the next maybe like a couple of months trying to get that second opinion and to get into treatment somewhere. I'm not going to name names of hospitals, but
No.
some really world renowned programs don't get back to people.
No. The system's broken, Bradley. We talk about it all the time on this
Oh
podcast,
yeah.
and that's where, you got to self-advocate because no one gives you anything.
Yep, exactly. And luckily, I say this all the time. I've been an advocate for my whole life. And when I was living in Worcester, going through my graduate program, I became a case manager for adults with disabilities, and both at like a day program and also out in the community. Um, and without having that experience of navigating and being an advocate for those guys and navigating their medical all of their medical stuff, the guys that I worked with, I would have been lost. They one of the things that they tried to do, they tried to discharge me um the day after I was admitted to the hospital because they said, oh, well, they let me know that the biopsy wasn't going to happen the weekend. And so they said, oh, we're going to discharge you. We'll call you back on Monday. We'll get you in on Tuesday for the biopsy. And I said, oh, no. I'm not going anywhere. Like, you just let me know that I may or may not have cancer, right? You're not even telling me if it's metastasized or not. Like, let me tell you what's going to happen. Like, if I discharge, you're not going to call me on Monday. You're not going to call me on Tuesday. You're going to call me on Wednesday or Thursday. And then I'm going to get in a biopsy, not that week, but the next week. But if I stay here, you're going to biopsy me on Monday, right? Like, you're just going to get it done because I'm here. Like, and this doctor looked at me as I said all this to him, and he was trying to argue with me. And he said, I need to go get my supervisor because he was some like resident. He got his supervisor. I said the exact same thing to his supervisor, and his supervisor looked at him and said, yeah, he's right. Like, he's going to stay here. And then I never saw that resident again. But yeah, it's wild. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You absolutely need to be your advocate. So yeah, during that time, as I stopped being able to eat food, wasn't working, not getting these called back from this hospital, we ended up reaching out to our family friend. And so, yeah, from the end of July, I think that I saw the doctor in Hartford Hospital the beginning of September, and that was when I moved back to Connecticut. And by the middle end of September, that was when I started my treatments.
So, and just for timing here, so we go into 2000. It's so crazy because 2019 wasn't that far ago, but like, we had this thing called COVID in between. So you go into, oh, yeah. So then I would assume then your treatments carry into that time of COVID in terms of what happened. So I say this often on the podcast. So like, it's kind of, interesting, Bradley, for me. As I said, I was taking notes here. Like there's a little bit of a map here that I'm drawing here, and there's like some of these like very unique things that happen. And hindsight's always 2020, where it's easy where we can go back. But like if you think like, any later that you decide to come back to Connecticut, like who knows what could have been, right? Because with COVID and getting in and seeing and everything that goes on, that what not everything that goes on, but everything that did go on during that time frame, like is just crazy, right? Like so, just imagine like navigating that. And I always tend to say like things happen for a reason. We never maybe understand any of the reasons. We may never know the answers to why things happen, but it's just kind of interesting here from a listener's point of view and from the map here that's being drawn, like how
Mhm.
things coincidentally happen in certain time frames.
Well, and it's, you use the word coincidence, and I use the word like synchronicity, right?
Yeah.
That's like a Jungian phrase of kind of like meaningful coincidence, right?
Yeah.
And and that's kind of something, as you mentioned, like this timeline and this thing, kind of like this progression. Um, and like that's what I mean of like my life is perfect. Like my life is now like just this like synchronistic mass of like coincidences. It really is like uh, awe-inspiring in like the true definition of the word, and beautiful and amazing. Um, but yeah, no, as you mentioned, it was right before 2020. Everybody, right when the lockdown started happening, that was right when I actually started like feeling good and was like trying to socialize and like getting
Yeah.
back out. I had basically been quarantined, locked down for months prior. And so everybody started complaining like a few weeks in, and I was like, "Yep, I've been doing it for the last 7 months."
So it was like a precursor to the real deal. Like it was like practice, basically.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
know we're joking about it, but like I mean, and again, there's two ways to look at this, right? Like there could be the positive way and the negative way, and you came out of it in a positive, in a very negative situation to come out super positive, right? So I assume then treatments did what they were supposed to do for you. And then now we come out of COVID and now you're able to kind of socialize a little bit because of where you are in the treatment cycle.
Yeah. And right now, kind of where I'm at, it's interesting, kind of talking about this now is that I mentioned that I have this rare cancer with this rare category, with this rare grouping, and then my oncologist, I love him. I'm going to give him such a big shout out. I love him so much. Dr. Elias, Dr. Rawad Elias, he was at Hartford Hospital. And only a few months ago, he took a new position he's the head oncologist, the chief oncologist at one of the hospitals up in Springfield. Um, Such a big shout out. He is such a good doctor, clinician, and also human being. Like I would not uh, be here without him. Like he's, I love him so much. It was so sad when he had to break up with me. um, and Yeah, and so oh my goodness, I totally got so sidetracked because I love him so much.
It's
He
okay.
Yeah, he let me see if I can go back. Yeah, we're okay. So we're talking about kind of this, as my doctor said, as Dr. Elias said, my cancer behaves erratically,
Mhm.
which is a fun thing to hear from your medical experts, that the thing that's killing you behaves erratically. Um, so yeah, like I'm kind of at the end of my standard treatment options. Like the chemo that I'm on right now um, is at the same time has been the most effective in terms of length of disease-free progression. So it has been the longest that any treatments have worked for me. And also, it was a treatment that starting off was a non-standard treatment option. It wasn't supposed to work for my grade, my category. And it's been the one that's kind of lasted the longest. And also with, and so I've been on this treatment for the last like year and a half, basically. And when I started this treatment, I made the decision that I wasn't going to pursue any other treatment options after any type of major disease progression with like my scans or anything. So I wasn't going to look at any clinical trials or any other kind of like weird adjacent. Oh, we're going to mix this chemo with this chemo. Like I'm okay. I've been doing treatments long enough that I don't need to be a guinea pig. And yeah, and so that was kind of like a difficult conversation or a difficult decision, and conversations that I've had with my family, my partners, my friends, and also kind of like my general community. I do YouTube updates every. I try to hit every 3 months, like with my scans, so that kind of like everybody who has been in contact with me can watch these updates and kind of see what's going on and kind of what I've been thinking about, and kind of sharing that news with everybody of like, yeah, I'm not going to pursue treatments. So many people kind of see that as Dino, I love that you say, everybody's a survivor, right? There can be this mentality of giving up, right? Or oh, you're not battling anymore. You lost the battle, or this kind of weird like outsider victim mentality almost. And from the beginning of my diagnosis, I've said people say, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, I'm sorry that, you're going through that. And, my response ranges from, understanding and compassionate to a little bit snarky, depending on how I'm feeling. But I tell them, like, oh, like, please don't be sorry for me. Like, I'm not sorry for myself. Like, I don't pity myself. I don't feel bad. Like, please don't apologize. Right. Like, you didn't do anything wrong. Like, I didn't do anything wrong. Like, it is what it is. Like, I'm here, living my life. Like, this is the life, this is the path that I've found myself upon. And like, I'm grateful for that every single day. And I think that is part of like my advocacy, right? Of like, there's definitely a little bit of like managing other people's emotions and feelings. And I try not to do that, but also showing them that like, oh, like, I'm facing, not only this disease, but like my mortality, my death, right? Like, from the very beginning, my diagnosis was a terminal diagnosis. Like, it always had a short prognosis with it. And for me, with my close relationship with my depression, with my suicidal ideation, my suicide attempt in high school, I've always been very comfortable with death and dying. And the like I mentioned before, we have a dark humor, dark this kind of ironic sensibilities in my family. And as I mentioned before, April 1st, 1994, I was born on April Fool's Day. Like, I appreciate that dark humor, and there's such like a joke to my life that I just love. I revel in it. I spent so much of my life wanting to die, wanting death. And by the time that I had done this work, this integration to fully commit to living my life and to being here and to choosing life, I get hit with a terminal illness. Like, there's just such like a beautiful humor to that. Like, whoever was writing my story, like the script of my life, like that's amazing. Like, I love that, and I think that one, it takes people off guard when I share that kind of perspective with them. But also I think that it makes people a little bit more comforting, knowing like, oh, like, at least somebody is facing it in that way. And then, so, like, that's kind of my more compassionate view of like, or my compassionate response to, I'm sorry you're going through that, to, oh, you're sorry. Good. I'm glad that I finally found somebody who's responsible, right? I'm glad that I have somebody to blame. Like, I'll totally blame you. I'm glad you can, provide that for me. But yeah, like, this has been, such like a beautiful journey, and I'm so glad that I get to share it in so many different ways, especially with the guys on the team too. Bringing it back to lacrosse a little bit, but sharing that perspective with these young guys.
Bradley, I gotta that was just so powerful what you explained. And so as we said before, I think when you open it, like you said, as a gift, and what you just gave, trying to think out loud here. Like, we're almost on 300 episodes, and we've had a lot of survivors on. Probably more than half have been survivors. Maybe one other person has talked about this topic. So there's like, right, like now you can have three, right? Like, you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about like taxes, or not taxes, but like it's politics, oh, religion, right? Like, so you're not supposed to talk about religion and politics, right? And I think the third taboo topic is death, that no one talks about. And then the fourth one is like bathroom habits, like, right? Like, no one ever talks about like their poop, like, which they should, especially with pancreatic cancer, but that's another day, another story. But like, death is like something that we are so like, we just don't talk about. And when I went through my dad, like, I talked about it a lot, man. And I delve into that whole topic of dying. And I commend you, man, for talking about mental health. That's probably another topic we don't have enough discussions about. I'm sure as being in that space, like, that's like having really hard discussions. I feel like, this is like so effed up as we record this, where we are in society. Like, no one wants to have really hard discussions. And I'm not saying, like, not calling the other side a name or this, but like, let's sit down, let's break bread, let's talk about these things, right? Like, and let's not be offensive to people in terms of the terms we use, and truly try to understand. And I feel like, everyone has a right to do what they want to do, and how they do it is very personal to them. And we need to respect that. And not everyone understands that, especially when it comes to cancer, right? In terms of that. But, death, it's really wild. Like, we have this, like, I feel like there's part of the society that has this real fascination with it. And like, and then there's this other part of society that doesn't ever want to talk about it and bring it up. But like, no one lives forever, man. And like, this one thing that, like, tomorrow's never promised. Like, it's never, right? Like, I could walk out today and get hit by a car crossing the street to get to my car, and not come home to my wife and kids, right? And that's awful, but that happens every day, right? and cancer diagnoses happen every freaking day. But there's something really powerful in what you said, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth here, as they say, but like it's almost like you're doing this on your terms is what everyone should do.
Hmm.
Like it's on Bradley's terms, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with how this rolls. I don't know how it's going to roll, but I'm okay with it, and I'm making the choices that are best for me. And I guess it goes along the line of acceptance. And I think when, in my experience of what I've done here in 14 years, when people have this acceptance that you have, man, that is so powerful. It's so powerful in so many ways, like from a mental health perspective, and then from just a physical aspect of surviving and the way you live. It's just so powerful, man. So I really do, and I'm not BSing you here, man. That was probably some of the best 5 minutes I've heard from someone who's not, who's you're a young kid, man. You're 30 years old. I could be your dad for Christ's sake. This is like crazy, like thinking about this, and to have that kind of wisdom and knowledge, and as I said before, as a listener, and maybe just because I've done this a lot of time, man, it's wild. And this is maybe where the religion will come into it. Like, I know you have going to East Catholic, Notre Dame, we were deep into like, the Bible and, what Jesus did. And, there were things that happened along Jesus's journey, right? That didn't make sense then, but then made sense after. And oftentimes I hear people's story for the first time, and you think about like the experiences you had, like going to East Catholic and having kind of, you said it, service to others. Like you, again, we said it before, we said it multiple times now, like it's ingrained in you, right? Like it's all like we drank the Kool-Aid, right? But that's part of who you become and why you've done things along the way and now why you're giving it back, right? And mental health, which I've said, man, whew, cancer is like 95% mental and
Oh yeah.
5% physical. If you have that mental health, and again, one of these topics that we don't talk enough about, of having these conversations about depression and everything else that impacts that, and like you said, substance abuse, like knowing that like is really key, and sometimes substance abuse is not just pills and opiates, it could be anything, it could be shopping, right? Like people like shop like because they feel good about themselves, buying all the latest and greatest, but they can't afford it. That's a mental health issue. That's not like, anything else other than that. Alcohol, of just numbing or whatever it is. And I've even seen it, Bradley, which is kind of interesting. It's like this, like the workout extremes, right? Like just working out like nine, 4 hours a day doing doubles. But why? Like, are you going to be a professional athlete, or or is there something wrong there mentally, right? Like, in really addressing those kinds of issues. So to go back to something you said about a gift, man, that's so special to hear you say that, and especially at a young age of 30, to be able to understand that and have that comprehension is so goddamn special, man. So I just want to thank you for saying the things you said here on this podcast, and it's just so important for people to really kind of take that in.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate it so much, and I'm so flattered. Thank you.
No, man. I mean, it's listen, I've done this a lot, as we said before and during this, and you know, again, we have a choice. Every day you have a choice to wake up, and you could look at things, you can look at the glass half full, or you look at it half empty. And I think you've taken that approach of looking at everything half full and making the best of that, and then trying to inspire, other people, with how you're living your life, which is on your terms, man, which is so goddamn special. Because just think about how many people go down that rabbit hole of like, whether it's to impress a boss or work or to live a certain lifestyle, to be a certain person. to do that, which just is not genuine. And that's the other, thing, like you're always trying to live up to someone else's expectations, even in cancer. Like, and what do I
Oh
mean by
yeah.
that? How many people you probably have met, and I've met them through the years, are like, they're like, hey, I don't want to do this, but I'm doing it for my wife, or I'm doing it for, so and so,
Yeah.
but it's powerful stuff, man. It's so powerful. I got a couple questions here for you, and we're going to share where our audience can connect with you. It sounds like it'll be on YouTube. What's it been for you? You talk a lot about lacrosse, and so I love lacrosse, by the way. Never played it. Went to Roger Williams, which is a small Division III program. When I was there, again, I could be your dad, but 25 plus years ago, we had a pretty good lacrosse team. I think they're last couple of years they've been competitive. And Clark was not in our conference, but I think they played them. So I used to see lacrosse at a very high level in college, and then when I had boys, I played basketball, so I was a big hooper. But I was
Hmm.
like, I never was given the opportunity to play lacrosse, and I was like, oh man, this sport's pretty awesome. And I think when you
Yeah,
watch
they,
it,
they can get to hit people. Let's go.
yeah, yeah,
What's not to like?
you got a stick, you can hit people, you got pads and a helmet, right? So both my boys at an early age started lacrosse early, at like 5 years old. I got them into it, right? And my older son played up until eighth grade, and he was a pretty good long stick midi. And then he went to high school, and the high school didn't have it. And I was like, damn, we really screwed my older son. We should have sent him to private school that had it, but whatever. It just didn't work out. But, still watch it when we can. And I think, Connecticut has the minor league or the major league indoor lacrosse. We've gone up to a couple games there up at Mohegan Sun, and it's just fun to watch and stuff. Um, but now that you're giving back, and you're back at your alma mater, coaching, what's that been for you? I'm just curious to, for someone who loved, like I love basketball, and I know that feeling, like when you go back and you kind of give that back, and now you've got these kids that are, I'm sure at East Catholic, they just haven't picked up the sport, but maybe there's some kids, that, are good athletes and trying to pick it up and get some of the kids like that. But then there's other kids that have probably played, from travel to youth league since, 4 or 5 years old, and now coming to high school. Like, what's that experience been for you to like coach and to kind of mentor and give that back, especially with everything that's going on with you in personal life?
Yeah, oh my God, I love it. I am not like a sports person. Um, people will be like, oh, I can't even like come up with examples to be like to show how not a sports person I am. Um, but for me, like there was just something about lacrosse that like connected. I think it was the big sticks and being able to hit people. um, but yeah, like being able to come back, especially with like the coach who impacted me so much, and being able to give back in that way. Like when I was there, we were horrible. We were horrible. I think that my freshman and sophomore year, we won a combined maybe 4 games ever. My senior year, we had like one of the best seasons we had ever had in the program, and like we went 500. I think I think we won half our games. And then by the next year, we were getting into like the state tournament, and we've been competitive in the state tournament basically like since then. Um, and so yeah, it's part of like it's amazing to kind of see where the program has come in the last 10, 13 years, 15 years, whatever. Um, and then also being able to like for me, like I said, I was kind of like the head JV coach, and when I was with varsity, I kind of joke I was like the sideline and culture coach. I came in and, like, got your helmet strapped up, your mouth guards in, right? Like it's about the respect of the game. And so for me, like coming in as the JV, as you mentioned, like I got the kids who had never picked up a lacrosse stick before, I got to teach them, how to throw, how to catch, how to do ground balls, how to play defense, and whether they're coming from another sport, getting used to
Mm-hmm.
like those adjacent skills, those crossover skills, or like, oh, we just had some boys on the team that you want to come out and have a good time with. Like, all right, like, we're here to be a competitive team, but like, yeah, let's do it. And for me, it was so much more about like the development of the young men, right, rather than like the sport. All the guys on our team can go and play at college. They all have that skill. They all have the capability to do that. Um, but it for me with the nature of the sport, right? Like lacrosse is the arguably the only true American game. And, it was given to the indigenous people of this continent by the creator, right? They didn't invent it. It wasn't something that they came up with like, oh, we got some sticks and a ball, right? Let's make a sport. It was given to them by the creator through ceremony, through spirit. And it was and still is played in that way with
Mm-hmm.
that respect of the game. And I say to the guys on my team, like, I can connect back every single life lesson that I've had, that I've gotten, to the game of lacrosse, whether that is being a balanced individual, right? Being able to play offense and defense. Whether that is how you conduct yourself when you're confronted with an opponent, right? We say, we have a phrase on our team that we respect everyone and fear no one, right? Like when we're going up against these teams that, win the state tournaments, when we're going up against these guys, like there's a sense of apprehension coming in, absolutely, but it's about, well, we respect ourselves, we respect our opponents, we're going to come in and play as hard as we possibly can, win or lose. And like we're not going to come in with the fear of, oh, they're so much better than us, and cower, right? No, it's a warrior game, right? This game not only was given as a ceremony, but it was given as a surrogate for war. It was given to show young men how to become warriors, how to become these integral members of their community, how to be good men, and what that means of being a good man or being a good person, right? Um, Lacrosse is for everybody. There's, as we kind of mentioned, it doesn't matter what side of the politics or what side of the aisle you're on, right? It's about respect.
Right.
And I think that lacrosse, really, can teach that. And I think that that's, one of the things that I love about the sport, and what I really bring is kind of bringing that like initiation aspect, that development aspect. And also that's like what I love to see, like the guys who are seniors now were freshmen on JV when I started 4 years ago or whatever. And now they're yelling at the freshmen, oh, strap up, we're on the field, right? Like, awesome. Like you guys you're picking up what we've been putting down.
My next question here, and I know you've mentioned your mom, you've mentioned siblings, you mentioned friends, and I know you had family in New Mexico. Sounds like you have a pretty good support system. What's it been like for that? Like, to have that around you. I know you mentioned, like, even being in New Mexico, your mom's, you're talking to your mom, but you get to the hospital, family showing up there. Like, let's talk a little bit about that, here briefly, if you can, just about the support that your friends, family, and, been for you around this journey.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think that any of us would be anything without our connections, without our relatives. Um, and for me, like, as a self-reliant, independent person, a strong-willed individual, um, not that I didn't think that I needed the support, not that I didn't have those relationships before, but it has really totally transformed that into really showing me so much more about what relationship means and what reciprocation in that relationship means. How do I give back to the people who showed up at the hospital for me? How do I give back to show that reciprocation? How do I give back to these random strangers that have given me money on GoFundMe? And for me, it's about how I live my life, how I conduct myself, and whatever. But it's really deepened those relationships for me, really brought them to some amazing places. We talk about, COVID and everything, and these kind of coincidental, synchronistic events. Right before my 26th birthday in 2020, a few days before, that was when I found out that my cancer had like really metastasized, and that like the Whipple surgery that we were talking about was totally off the table. So there was like absolutely no cure, no chance of it going away. And a few days before that, my father almost died from an aortic dissection. A few months before that, my oldest brother died from an overdose and complications from the overdose. So it was right at this time that I got hit with my brother's death, my dad almost dying, and then like the absolute reality of my mortality, of my death in X amount of time. And, you know, it from this point has totally reshaped all of my close relationships. I kind of like apologize to the people around me of being like, I'm sorry you got caught up in my craziness. But yeah, even within the last month, or excuse me, within the last year of making this decision of, all right, I'm going to stop treatments and really face this transition in like a mindful and present way. Like my family has kind of blown up. Part of this conversation that I had with my support system was, hey guys, I want to be present for my death. This is what that looked like for me. This is kind of what I need from you. And a part of that was asking them to be responsible for kind of like their bullshit. Like I wanted them to be present with me, and they couldn't do that if they were, caught up in, oh, my relationship is blah, and all this stuff. So I was really like, all right, you guys got to deal with your shit so we can all be together in a good way during this time. And, as you kind of mentioned before, we know what we want. We think we know what we need, but we actually have no idea what we need. And that was kind of this process over the last year of each member of my family and myself and my partners really taking it upon themselves to look at what this integration and healing and responsibility is for them so that they can be present with me. And it resulted in my parents splitting up. A long time coming, it was absolutely the best thing that happened. My parents splitting up, and all of these, me and my partner at the time also splitting up. But all of these things that were us taking responsibility for ourselves and our healing and bringing ourselves back into balance so that we could be present with one another. Like, I have given up the the Disney fairy tale of Prince Charming or whatever, but my brain said my fairy tale funeral. Of having like my family gathered around and whatever, and like I know that isn't the case, right? I lost my older brother. My parents split up. This kind of ideal nuclear family image just isn't the situation, isn't the reality, And so I know now that I can be with my mom in a good way. I can be with my remaining brother in a good way. I can be with my father in a good way. As we've all taken the responsibility, and I kind of wanted to mention something earlier too. Dino, you talk so much about acceptance and choice. And I think that that's been another big learning for me, another big gift that I've received of this absolute, in recovery, we talk about radical acceptance, of being powerless to whatever substance, to whatever the imbalance is, whether it's shopping, working out, whatever. Being powerless to that, right? That radical acceptance of this is the situation, right? This radical acceptance of I have this disease, I have this cancer. And with that, I used to hate the word surrender because in our society, in our culture, we have such connotations of like, oh, you're showing your belly, right? You're surrendering, you're giving up, you're waving that flag. And for me, I've been shown that surrender is that radical acceptance. It is, we're all in that river of life. We're all in the Tao, but how much is swimming up current? How much is trying to get to the shore? How much is fighting the rapids and the tides? And how much is that radical acceptance to I'm surrendering and I'm floating on the surface and I know that I will get to the source, right? Like all rivers flow to the ocean, all rivers flow back to the source, and then it evaporates and starts all over again, right? And I think that with that radical acceptance, that's when we can truly, truly make the choice, right? As what you were saying of that, once we get to that point of being able to float on that surface, that radical responsibility of going with the flow, then we can go, oh, well, the shore looks good over there. I can make the choice to get my way over there, right? As I'm floating, as I'm accepting. And, and I think that that's, one of the hardest things is that radical acceptance, that choice, and to be present. And as you talked about, mentioned like my support system. And I think that is something that, I've kind of asked the impossible with my immediate support group of doing this work with me. And, and for me, as, you talk about the glass being half empty and half full. And for me, it's a glass of water. It is what it is. Cause, I, of course I wanted my parents to stay together. Of course I wanted my brother to find his healing and recovery and his sobriety. Um, and also I see that his death and his, I hate using the word brokenness, but his imbalance led me to my healing, to my recovery, which led me to a good place, to being confronted with this terminal illness and to being able to address this terminal illness and to address the situations that I've found in my life in a good way and in a healed integration, or a healing and integrating way, right? Because it's a process. It's
Mhm.
never complete. But that has also brought healing and integration and presence and balance to all of these people who are my support group, right? My dad is in such a better relationship now. My mom is in such a better relationship now. My brother is in such a better relationship now, not just with the people around them, but with themselves, right? Everything is my relative, including the various components of myself. That's why I talk about, I've had a relationship with suicide and I've had a relationship with depression, right? These are things that I can learn about. And, as we talked about, not being on, the opposite side of the aisle, but respecting and going, oh, well, what do you have to teach me? What does my depression show me? And, I can't remember who said it, but, there's a quote of death is the greatest teacher. What does that mortality have to show me? What does my death have to show me? It's about that reciprocation. You talk about my support system, and it's like, well, everything is my support system. um when I'm fully present and being balanced and being in that place, absolutely. um yeah, no, it's just it's beautiful about how that reciprocation kind of bleeds over.
Another golden nugget, Bradley, as I say here often on the podcast, because you're in a very unique place for the age you are. Something that we've said a lot is acceptance. And, as I mentioned, when my dad was sick, I accepted like the reality of it, right? And you looked at it and said, all right, what's the best thing you can do, right then and there. And, you know, we live in a really, really wild world, right? Like society. And I think, again, this has been an amazing conversation, but also probably a very hard conversation to have for both of us in some aspects. And maybe let me phrase that. It's probably a hard conversation for people to listen to what
Mm-hmm.
we're saying because of the fact that I have acceptance, you have acceptance. Not a lot of people have acceptance. So some people may get really turned off by this, which I hope is not the case. Maybe it opens them up to find that acceptance. That's what I hope. I personally hope. And I appreciate you being able to open yourself up and share that.
Of
And
course.
I'll sum it up this way. A good friend of mine, um, and what you said is so freaking powerful, man. But maybe that people will relate to this. Like a good friend of mine had a similar conversation with them. Like, hey, like when my dad was dying, I had acceptance of it. I didn't get him taken to Disney World, but everything I needed to say, everything I needed to get off my chest, I did. And he's like, man, I wish I had that because, my mom passed away from a heart attack and I got no fight with her and, never really made up. We never really got to that point where, and I've always looked back on that conversation with this good friend of mine and I was like, man, that's special, man, to have that, because think about like, again, I could go out and not to use this another corny analogy, like, hey, live your day like it's your last day and don't leave any stone unturned, right? Like make sure the people that are in your circle, like you said, like your family and friends, like you have to have these tough conversations, but like we're good. We're good.
Yeah.
We're all in a good spot, right? And I have all these different relationships, but like how many people go through life and don't have that? So it's super powerful, man, and especially coming from a 30-year-old. I really am amazed by what you've had to say today. I've got one last question for you here, and this is probably I always say the loaded. It's the most loaded question I have. There's no right or wrong, but from your perspective, from what you've been going through the last 5 years, what's your definition of pancreatic cancer? How do you define it?
Oh my goodness, that is a loaded question. It's such a good question too. I have never been asked that. I love questions that stump me, that make me stop and think. I really appreciate that. Um, the thing that is coming to my mind right now, and it's something that we've mentioned before, is a gift, right? And it sounds so weird to like say that, but it really truly is. And I think that, these conversations that we're having is just a continuation of that gift, right? Like gifts are meant to be given. I can't give my cancer away. I'd love to, do a
Yeah.
regift for sure. Um, but it is something that like I have said, like I do think that everybody, I wish that everybody got the gifts and the lessons that you get from cancer without having the cancer, right? Yeah, and I just think that it's a gift, and I think that it's one of the things that this life is a gift, and it's meant to be given. It's meant to have that continual reciprocation. Um, yeah, I think that that's my quick and dirty definition, at least right now. It's coming to my head.
It's perfect. You absolutely nailed it. And like I said, there's no right or wrong, man. And given what you've gone through, again, I said this before, it's pretty special to be able to be in that place.
Yeah,
Last
thank
thing
you.
here for our audience watching, listening. I know you mentioned YouTube. So is there a place where people can kind of connect? Maybe someone going through a very similar journey, or kind of someone who wants to kind of keep track of your journey. Is there a place for them to connect, and where would that be, Bradley?
Yeah, yeah. So I do not have social media.
It's a
One
good
of
thing.
the Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's never intrigued me. So yeah, I do have a GoFundMe. As we mentioned, the system is broken.
Yep.
um, but I use that pretty regularly to put out my updates. And so that is kind of like my YouTube channel and my GoFundMe are generally like connected. So if you Google Bradley Paul pancreatic cancer GoFundMe, you'll find it. If you YouTube Bradley Paul cancer, you'll find my channel as well, my YouTube videos. Um, and then other than that, I do have like a LinkedIn, and you can find my email on my LinkedIn as well if there is anybody looking for more personal connection out there.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome. And we'll put a link to the YouTube probably in the description as well, as long as with the GoFundMe as well. So,
cool. Thank you.
Bradley,
I appreciate that.
no, this has been awesome, man. I know we usually, we went over our, usually we go like an hour, man, and this was just let it roll, man. And it was just great stuff, and I truly mean that from the bottom of my heart, man. It's been really an honor to have you on, and man, keep doing what you're doing because it's such a special place. And I know again, people may not understand that, but I know you understand that, and that's what matters to me here. We don't do this podcast for the guests. Like I mean, I don't mean it that way. We want people to listen and we want people to watch, but I'm here for the guests to help you share your journey. And where we went today, I know we said like I think before we record, we're like, hey, we go anywhere, it doesn't matter, like whatever rabbit hole. Like we usually don't go into well, we do go into politics because the system's broken, and like our
Yeah.
politicians should do better. Like they should do better. Um,
Yep.
and so we went into some very important discussions here on this disease. And so I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity in Project Purple to share that journey and to share those stories. So it's been an honor to have you on our podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Dino. No, I appreciate you and Project Purple and you guys reaching out. This has been incredible. I have such gratitude for you and the work that you do, um, and even going back to, like, I want to give a shout out to your father. Like he started this whole thing. Like, we wouldn't be here without him. So I wanted to give him that honor and respect as well. Like, it's about that reciprocation. It's all about those relationships. So just thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And like, the work that you do is that reciprocation, right? Like, it is that work, is that gift.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Project Purple podcast. If you liked today's episode, feel free to share this episode. Make sure you follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, please be safe. That's another episode of the Project Purple podcast.